I love Mario 64. Everyone loves this game, right? It's got the hops, it's got the glitches, it's got the stars and the coins and the Goombas and the Chuckyas. Almost every little bit of this crazy game is so dang good, so gosh darn nostalgic, so show-stoppingly— Wait, hold up. Gotta get the right angle for this, come on. Alright, so if there's one part of Mario 64 that everyone can agree has aged poorly, it's the draw distance. Holy shit, how did anyone deal with this? But if there's a second thing everyone can agree has aged poorly in Mario 64, it's the camera. Stemming from this god-awful controller that neglected a second analog stick, Mario 64's camera is one made up of fixed angles, switching between modes, never getting that sweet spot between zoom-ins and zoom-outs, and just generally making the game less fun to play. So yeah, if you clicked on this video expecting a defense of the functional aspects of this camera system, I'm sorry. Get the PC port. I use 64+, it has a phenomenal analog camera. But the thing is, there are a few very specific consequences of this antiquated viewing angle that actually pave the way for how cameras can frame the action in modern third-person games, and I believe these little quirks contribute heavily to how Mario 64 feels to play and how it stays in our minds. In order to make my point here though, first I'm gonna take you out of video games entirely to talk about the weird and wonderful world of When you really break it down, the primary difference between various mediums of storytelling is the way information is presented to the listener, viewer, player, whoever's consuming the story. And for a long time, film was considered the most advanced medium of storytelling, using sound, dialogue, and visuals to relay the story. Out of these three, the most unique to film was the use of moving images. You get to see the action take place in motion on the screen, and there's an awful lot of pieces running together to make this work. The subtleties in acting, the special effects, even the speed at which the action takes place. However, the one aspect of cinema that probably sees the most innovation to this day is cinematography. Simply put, cinematography is the art of creating a moving picture in and of itself. This is where the camera is pointed, how it moves, and how these choices can affect the way a viewer will feel about a given shot or scene. One of the reasons Citizen Kane is hailed as the best film ever made is because the ways it used its camera were unlike any other film for the time, and its shots only seem standard today because it was the one to set those standards. My favorite example of the way a shot's composition can add to how it feels is from a scene in Fellowship of the Ring. In the book, it reads like this.
The sound of hooves stopped. As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across the lighter space between two trees, and then halt. It looked like the black shade of a horse led by a smaller black statue. The black shadow stood close to the point where they had left the path, and it swayed from side to side. Frodo thought he had heard the sound of snuffling.
It's a pretty good passage, gets the point across, but you have to be pretty into it to feel the fear it's meant to inspire. For the film, a few changes were made to the moment. They have all the hobbits together rather than hiding behind separate trees, and the scene is shot like this. Holy shit. You can just feel the tension here. The low angles that put you in Frodo's position, the way it zooms in on all the loud details to make us focus in on them like the hobbits do, and these wide shots convey how vulnerable our heroes are, how absolutely fucked they would be if they made even a single mistake here. Now, all of this is to say that the way information is presented in a visual medium is pretty damn important, which brings us back to video games. Much like film took a while to get from "Be amazed! Take a gander at this train coming at you straight out of the wall!" to "By golly, we could tell stories with this new technology." Video games progressed from moving things on a screen, to displaying symbols to represent more complex things like people and spaceships, to a point where you can identify specific characters with simple storylines, all the way to the RPG epics of the 16-bit era. But throughout all of this, there wasn't a lot of room to experiment with camera angles or anything like film has done for over a century. In most cases, because these games were based on sprites, you'd get top-down or side-scrolling. Of course, there were exceptions, primitive first-person games and very early efforts at playable 3D, but they were as much an exception then as first-person films are today. So when true 3D finally became viable, developers had a real challenge to overcome. Some games, like shooters and racing games, were able to just keep doing what they always had with less limitations, but the other genres of the time had to solve a fundamental problem that had never been tackled before in the history of entertainment. If we create worlds in full 3D for players to explore, how do we present these worlds to them? Early efforts had very little success. Games like Bug hardly took advantage of the extra dimension, and most games released before or during the first half of 1996 ended up compromising a great deal. Looking at you, Crash Bandicoot, fucking DKC with some Indiana Jones references, I see your ploy. Well, Mario 64 was the game to finally come along with a solution, and if you're not completely familiar with how it works, here's a quick overview. There are two selectable camera options, contextualized in-game as two Lakitu news reporters. The primary option is normally referred to as the Lakitu cam, which is mostly hands-off. Using the camera buttons, players can switch between various angles at ease in most environments, though small interior spaces will often lock the camera to one spot and simply rotate it around. The other option, used to line up difficult jumps, is the Mario cam. This one does its best to stay behind Mario at all times, and generally isn't great for long-term use because the constant spinning around Mario makes it difficult to judge a lot of turns. Both of these modes can zoom out to show more of the action, both can be zoomed in for a stationary over-the-hat view, and both do their absolute best to avoid clipping into level geometry, which is what causes problems in spots like the pyramid and shifting sandland. Oh, and there's an option in the menus to switch Mario Cam for a static camera, which is fun to play around with, but only useful in very niche circumstances. Most of you probably aren't even aware of it. What this all results in is an experience that's easy to pick up, doesn't force you to constantly adjust angles, and most importantly for our purposes, controls the view players see just enough to squeeze out many of the benefits of a film's carefully controlled shots. For instance, try to picture this in your mind. You're in Bob-omb Battlefield on the first star, following the main pathway through the level. You've just passed by the chain chomp, and now you're coming up on that little wooden bridge that tilts when Mario stands on it. So what are you visualizing? Maybe something like this? How about this? Maybe, but I'm willing to bet most of you saw something more like this, and the reason I'm so confident is that the angle you see here is what the game naturally directs you to see as you play. This is just how the Lakitu camera frames the action, and it's about as interesting as you could make this spot in the level look. On the left, we have a wide open area that Mario can explore for some extra coins in the red coin star spawn. In the center are these jagged rocks patrolled by bombs in pretty much the only time they even try to sell the battlefield idea, and to the right we see the opening in the gate leading to the trench, and ultimately up the pathway to summit the mountain. Speaking of, when climbing up the mountain itself, the camera spirals around slowly to give you a clearer view of what's up ahead, and makes the climb itself feel kinda cinematic in a weird, detached sort of way. And while Bob-omb Battlefield is a pretty standard example, you can find this attention to detail in the camera's movement all over the game, like when it follows Mario through doors or zooms in for an animation, and the angle it gives the castle's rooms themselves. Something consistent here is that, no matter the level or location, it'll always put the camera in the most visually interesting place, where the most objects and textures can be seen by the player while maintaining playability. Turn the camera around in Peach's castle lobby, and I mean, that window is kinda cool, I guess, but the normal angle is just nicer to look at and so much more nostalgic. When I went through some of these levels collecting footage using only the player-controlled camera offered by 64+, it genuinely felt kind of uncanny. These places that I'd been through time and time again felt different and unfamiliar. They felt so much less magical. It all kinda reduced down to simple gameplay that the visuals are supposed to mask, and really highlighted that this is an early 3D game. And since I know some of you will be questioning me, wondering if any of this is intentional at all, allow me to introduce you to possibly the most effective use of the camera in a Mario game to this day, Big Boo's Haunt. See, there's a reason I chose a tense, maybe even frightening scene from Lord of the Rings earlier, rather than any of the beautiful wide shots or action sequences from the trilogy, and that's because I find that horror or anxiety, or any of the negative emotions cinematography can make us feel are often the most intense. And while Mario rarely goes anywhere too extreme, Big Boo's Haunt has one of the most genuinely unsettling atmospheres I've encountered in a mainline Mario game. Even when we find the small cage used to enter the level, the first thing Mario does is shrink to a minuscule size and leap inside. A pretty big departure from the more whimsical entrances Mario has traversed so far. It almost feels like Mario's being forced into the level against his will as a consequence for killing that Big Boo. Upon loading into the stage, the first thing you see is this colossal structure before you, towering above Mario as the camera places you at an angle directly behind his head. Upon entering the building, the camera shifts to a view staring down at Mario, further emphasizing just how small and helpless you are in this place. Every room in the mansion uses this kind of camera angle, static and voyeuristic, realistic, as if the player is staring at Mario from the view of a ghost in the walls. It also allows the developers to put all of the detailing in these rooms in spots that you can actually see. Some of these rooms almost feel like places that could actually exist, and since this is 64's equivalent to the ghost houses of Mario World, the designers can hide all kinds of tricks and traps and hidden spots all over the place. Oh, also, when you do use a free camera, it's way more obvious that rooms are unloading as soon as you leave them. Now, if you're at all familiar with the original Resident Evil trilogy, you'll know that what Mario 64 is doing in this stage is very similar to the still camera angles used by those games to control what the player sees and raise that sense of tension. Both games are clearly taking influence from a number of famous haunted house type horror movies, and it works just as well here. Big Boo's haunt probably shows off the camera in this game the best, but if you're looking, you can see similar techniques used in every level. The camera stays in the middle of Lethal Lava Land's volcano to give you a better view of what's up ahead on this narrow pathway. In Shifting Sandland, it stays at a lower angle most of the time because so much of the stage is reliant on seeing what's in front of you and above you rather than any pitfalls below. This also helps to give this tiny desert at least some sense of vastness that it otherwise wouldn't have. Hazy Maze Cave keeps the camera much closer to Mario, lending to a claustrophobic feeling, and for the water levels, it's essential to ensure that the camera follows Mario in the way it does, otherwise the controls just break right down and become a pain to use. Developers at Nintendo have cited Japanese miniature gardens as a source of inspiration when working on this game, and I think a lot of that careful control you get with a tiny garden and how it's presented is in the way this camera system works. It's the perfect way to display these little levels to players, and allows the stages to leave a lasting impression on us, even so many years after playing for the first time. If you boot up a third-person adventure game today, you'll see how many of them have taken this almost cinematic approach to the camera even further. The recent Spider-Man games on PlayStation have the same motion and energy to them as the Spider-Man films do. Uncharted, Dark Souls, fucking Lego Star Wars, they all do this in ways that really enhance the story and gameplay. It's something that we all take for granted nowadays, but it had its start all the way back in Super Mario 64. So next time you're playing this old game, and the camera does something ridiculous to lead to your immediate demise, just remember, there's a lot of good this weird old camera system does. And then go download 64+, trust me, you'll thank me. But for now, I have to thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments or my Discord server link below. And while you're down there, subscribe and like or something, it helps, I think. I'll see you next time.
Waluigi, is that you? Help me, Waluigi, they trapped me in the shot block, Waluigi, help me! You gotta help me! Waluigi, please! Please help me! Please, God! Please help me!